This is the Blueprint Podcast, and I'm your host, Dr.Jelani. There's a specific kind of internal conflict that occurs when a person with an engineering mind enters a room governed by pure emotion. In business, if the system fails, you troubleshoot the logic. In law, if the statute is unclear, you seek the intent. But in Caribbean politics, when the system fails, we often double down on the very habits that caused the collapse in the first place. Rushton Paray is a rare hybrid in our landscape. He's an ICT strategist, a lawyer, an MBA in innovation, and the former member of parliament for the constituency of Mayaro. But more than all of the titles, he's a man who tried to reform the machinery of his own house from the inside and felt the full weight of the status quo being pushed back against him. And as we sit down in the shadow of the 2025 election, that question isn't who won the seats. The question is, can a rationalist actually survive the arena? This is the blueprint of Rushton Paray. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Jelani. I appreciate the invitation, and I look forward to a very good conversation today.
Thank you. So how is Mayaro?
Fantastic. We're preparing for Easter. It is a highly commercial time for us. We're welcoming every single citizen to spend the weekend for Easter in Mayaro. As MP, back then I would ensure conversations with all our hoteliers. I will connect to WASA, make sure we have water and so on in all our facilities, engage our small vendors. I want when people come to Mayaro, they feel safe, the hospital can deal with any issues, and I think, we are always in a state of preparedness for that. So there's always room for improvement, but I think we're looking forward to a bumper Easter coming next couple of weeks.
It's interesting. As well, I am a northern person, right? And we have, I guess, the amenities, all the amenities one is expected. Yeah. And so, as a northerner, from the northern part of the country, you will look at rural Trinidad in a particular way. But yet in our conversation, when you speak about Mayaro, you can literally see the pride that is coming out. So I want to get a sense as a young boy, young Rushton growing up in Mayaro. What is it like then, and you could bring us into now?
So I'd probably like to respond to you in this way in terms of the Rushton Paray who became an MP in September of 2015. That person was a solid combination of nature and nurture. Rushton Paray grew up as a young boy in the 1970s in Guaya Guayari, where Trinidad and Tobago was now seeing a transformation from an agricultural society into an industrial one. And you could not have a better view of that transition sitting in Guaya Guayari. Because in 1972, 73, somewhere around there, when Amoko started drilling offshore in the marine operations, Mayaro, Guaya Guayari changed in terms of traffic, in terms of movement of people. There was a time that you were warned, do not stand on the side of the road between 6 and 8 o'clock, you're going to get knocked down because of the volume of traffic. Now, I sat in my grandmother's shop, we were always business people, and I saw faces change. I saw your normal neighbors, young, black, brown people, And all of a sudden, you were seeing Caucasians, you were seeing hundreds of expatriates, and they come into my grandmother's shop. We had a little bar, and as a 9-year-old, I'm listening conversations, and I'm hearing about multi-million-dollar contracts and drilling. And so that transformation to me was something that stuck with me going forward. And then growing up in Guaya Guayari, you have access to the beach, you have access to the fishing port, that created a perception in terms of my own mind of the importance of your coastal region, the importance of fishing, the importance, what role these people play in your community. And when you look at, I grew up in a home with a father as a policeman, and policemen long ago were policemen.
Yes.
They were men who would give an arm and a leg for the sailors. I'm not saying they are not good police officers today,
Yes.
but they will tell you in most professions today there are people who are there for work.
Yeah.
Right?
For the salary.
But my dad, from a nurture perspective, he instilled the fear of the law and God in me, and he was very militarized. And as I told you the time I got here, it is because he taught us to be on time every time. And that was a problem while I was MP. So when I get an invitation to a function, I am reaching before time, and when I get there, they're still putting up tablecloth and banners, and everybody confused now because the MP reached and we are ready. And I would tell them, listen, relax yourself. This is for the next time you invite me. I know I will be on time.
Yes.
So with that in terms of, my development as a young man with a father figure in the home, and it showed me the importance of having father figures in the home. Not to say that you have homes with single mothers who don't do exceptionally well, but from my experience, my dad created by shortage of who the man that I became. And when you flip that, I'm seeing two powerful women in my home. My mother and my grandmother were the business people. And I would see them start business from 5 in the morning, because to catch that first sale, the chopper in Galeota is flying at 6. So all the maxis with workers coming into Mayaro, they stop by my grandmother's shop and they buy cricks and sausage and sweet drink and bread and newspaper. So from 5 in the morning, these two women are up and they finish business at 7 in the night. So for us as young children, my sisters and I, we are seeing these two women take a lead in a business world that is dominated by men. That had a big impact on me. And again, it brought that dimension of the importance of women in organizations and leadership and so on, because I've seen it. And then my mother, not wanting just to be a daughter-in-law in the house, she says, look, I want to do something on my own. So what she did, she got somebody to build a fall coop in the back of the home, and she started to mine layers. And because she mined these layers, she buy a bag of crack corn and feed and so on. And then all of a sudden, she had my sisters and I, we were packaging these things in 1 pound bags, and we were selling. And eventually my mother started her own little business and so on. So the entrepreneurship part of me came from them. And then while we were children in Guaya Guayari, there were 2 East Indian families. It was us, and probably a mile down the road there was another family. But primarily Guaya Guayari, Newlands was primarily African-based, a lot of African people. So all our workers, if you work in the store, the people who mommy would have hired to look after us when they're in the business were Baptists, were from different faiths. So when time for us to get out of mommy's hair, we went with the nanny, up by their home, we would go to their churches and so on. And my mother tried to instill a good spiritual value system in us. We are Hindus. But back then, there were no temples close by. So she jacketed me up, put a Bible in my hand, and sent me to the Seventh-day Adventist Church up the road. So you put all of that together, and it creates the framework of who landed in the parliament in September of 2015, and how those things shape my view of the world. I feel comfortable in my skin anywhere I go. I went to Roman Catholic primary school. I went to an Anglican secondary school. I married a Muslim woman. So I've had the best of all worlds, and I am comfortable. And this is why in Mayaro, being a complex constituency, I tell you, Mayaro is the most complex constituency in all 41. When you have 5 competing industries, you have, finance, fishing, hotel, tourism, agriculture, and every every area requires a different tool, and you as an MP have to manage those things and manage expectations, and you have to relate to people. So I hope I got to the point that you asked a question about Rushton Paray as a young man. Those are the things that would have shaped me and the way I saw the world and the way how I delivered in terms of what I knew my job ought to be.
You know what's interesting about that story? I would say that is the story of Trinidad and Tobago, because the product of Rushton Paray, let's say that individual that stood in the parliament for the first time, is not simply just a young man who grew up in a community, and I think that our audience will appreciate to see all of the component parts, to see how the community played a role, to see how it is that your father played a role, and not only your father, but by virtue of his experience in the police service, to see how women played a role, and to bring the the molding product, of Rushton Paray. What an interesting concept. So, we have identified the positives, but is there something that you would have learned in your time growing up in Mayaro, as a young man, that the adult Rushton would have had to revisit those thinking?
I mean, there are so many things that go wrong, and I'll tell you from a business perspective. So the persons on the ground, they see you drive a nice car and they look at your house and they feel that somehow you just stumbled into it. But nobody sees the amount of failures that you have before. Because I can tell you, if you don't make mistakes, you will never grow. And there are things in Mayaro now, fortunately, if not unfortunately, I'm a forever optimist. I love to see the bottle half full. I am a what if kind of guy. If you tell me that this can't happen, I go, okay, but what if it can? What impact it is going to have? And how can we benefit from it? And there are things in Mayaro that still doesn't work well. We still have some issues around water, which is structural and engineering issues. No matter how much pipe you put on, and how much valve and how much, patches you fix it, Mayaro has 4 million gallons of water shortage today. And if we can produce more water, Mayaro will always have problems with water, and more so if we want to build on our tourism sector. We have major projects coming down in stream with Manatee, with ExxonMobil, and these things will be launched from the Galeota Point operations. We're going to be moving a sizable amount of people into the community at some point in time. We need to have water. So just use as an example. So those things we took for granted as children growing up. You run in the pond, you run in the sea. But today, you need solid pipe-bound water for both industry, both commercial, both domestic. So those are the things, we have to address.
But, you raise a point that I'm not going to let you slide by with it, which is this. So you expressed in your growing up, there was a change that took place in terms of the composition of a community. And here now you're also predicting that there will be another change in the future development of the community. Now, based on what you have said so far, that change that took place in terms of the demographics changing came up for the positive. Us moving to 2026 and beyond, especially when it is that you're living in a world now where persons are individualists. They prefer isolation. They prefer this is mine, and they see outsiders as a threat. How can we prepare a community, an area, for the future like that?
So Mayaro itself is no stranger to transient crowds. It has been part of the system for 50 years. My challenge is that if we don't put systems and perhaps even go far and talk about legislation to make sure that communities develop when these industries restart, what we'd have back is in the 1980s where companies from outside of Mayaro came in, they worked, got the wealth, and they left. Mm-hmm. So the wealth that was generated in Mayaro in the 1970s and 80s, there are a few families that benefit. Mm-hmm. But much of the wealth would have left and gone with companies. Some left the country, some would have gone back into Port of Spain and San Fernando. Now, what do we do to prepare for this second tranche that I fully believe that is going to come? We need to have, and as you say, we've grown into a society where you have individualism. I think social media has caused people to, pull back in, contract, be happy to be by themselves, communicate on social media. But as communities, we have 27 communities in the Mayaro constituency. All of them have different approaches, different modes of income, different styles, different opportunities for business. What I did as MP for the 10 years, I never went and tell communities what I want you to do. I would have gone to them and said, what would you like to do? Because I saw myself as a member of parliament who has what you call the golden thread to knit things together. And if you tell me, look, this group of people, you want to do something, my job is, one, how I'm going to get private sector involved, what role the state is going to play, how can I help you with business plans, how can I get you finance? Mayaro has a unique identity when coming to finances, also the commercial banking system. Mayaro has 2 privately funded institutions that are capitalized over $200 million. So you have MyPed and you have the Wyoming Credit Union, which can provide finances for small entrepreneurs, small enterprises. And it's just a matter of being able to mold that together. And I mean, it's something that we started to work on. Unfortunately, it stopped, but I'm doing it a bit privately now. I still have a few families because I try to focus on helping families in business. Why? When you try and work with individuals and they lose courage, they drop off. But if I have the mom, the dad, and the children involved, then they work as a unit together. And, they must understand that cash in your pocket is not wealth. 2 chains around your neck is not wealth. Wealth has to be something that is generational. I can pass land, I can pass a house, And if I even go further into finances, if I encourage people in the community in Mayaro to understand buying stocks, buying bonds, buying shares, look at IPOs, put $100,000 that you may have in the bank, getting 3.5% interest. Hey, put it in an IPO, look at a new company. So in this way, you have generational wealth for children and grandchildren going on.
But Rushton, what's your position and how you see things, that's not normal. Yeah. Because you are talking about, all right, as opposed when teaching financial literacy, not the individual, but the family, right? Most MPs or most politicians or most persons who just want to, this is a checklist. Yeah. I want to say I had a financial literacy program. So that full loop thinking, where did that come from? That is one. Yeah. And the next thing, you're talking about IPOs, you're talking about business, you're talking about finances, right? But you're a young boy from Mayaro. I understand the intricacies and the component parts that went into it because of the industrialization. But it appears as though you are the outlier as opposed to the norm. Mm-hmm. And I want to try to understand that.
So I stopped short in the first part of the explanation of the nature and nurture. So we run family businesses, so we're involved in retail. Traditionally came out of the supermarket industry, so customer interaction, customer relationship, that's things that you grew up with, which augured well when I became MP because you have to relate to people.
Right.
But then I went on and did information technology. I'm a telecommunications engineer by profession. I have run an IT business for over 30 years. We primarily support the energy companies on the southeastern coast. And we have grown the business. But more importantly, I never saw myself as a politician or even a career politician. I see myself as a fixer, a solution provider. I like to fix things. I don't like employees coming in and say, well, Mr. Paray, I'm having a problem here, there, and everywhere. I want you to say, well, Rushton, look, we have a problem here, but this is a couple of things that we can't do. because I want to train you to think. I want thinkers around me. I don't want to do all the work. I want guys around me who probably even smarter than I am, right? And that is the way you move forward. And in the business, you know, I hire good people, bright people, young people, and we've grown the business. You know, you have situations where in leadership, they tell you if in a crisis, you have to come down in the round and you fail. If you empower people around you, then the business gets done. So in the MP's office, I empowered my staff. So we ran an IT-driven office in Mayaro. So you could have gotten 80% of these services online. You could have go to our website, make requests for recommendations. I have donated wheelchairs and crutches and so on. I see them yet, you know. Because they get them online, we process it, I get my staff to do it because, one, you had to have a system while you're in opposition. That the day you go into government, you don't fail your constituency.
Correct.
Because you have to carry the same level of service, so you put systems in place. And when you empower your staff, whereas other MP office might get 10 things done for the guy, I was getting 100 things done. Right? Because everything was fully automated. And then I would call up PS and say, look, so I saw MP Paray here, you know, would it be okay for, if any future requests, my CSR, this person that can liaise with you directly? No problem. I don't have to talk to here again.
Yeah. So
something comes up in HGC, so one of my staff can do it. And it comes back, how do you empower people in organizations? How do you empower people in a cabinet? How do you empower persons in a government? How do you match the right skill for the right job with the right tone and the right language? That is an art. That is something that you have to develop over time. And I learned it in the business, in our private business. And the exposure that I would have gotten working for foreign companies, and you're sitting in a boardroom somewhere, and you are this little fella from Mayaro, and then you are speaking to men with PhDs and MBAs, and you have to cut it, or you get cut out.
Yeah.
So you know, coming into the parliament in 2015, I was no stranger to debates.
Right.
I was no stranger to negotiations, and I don't cower easily. I am very structured in my language. I am not fearful of anyone. I don't say things in public that I can't back up. So like I would have meetings and so on, and you know, you go to some meetings and say, but turn off your phone. I say, no, keep all your phone on. Because you're free to record me, you know. Because anything I say, I will stand by, because I don't lie on people. I will never speak untruth about people. You know, the parliament told us, right? You know, they say, you know, you have parliamentary
Privilege, yes.
But the clerk told us that, so listen, when you speak the truth. And you speak what you believe in your heart is the truth. Don't go and lie.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yes.
So
just
me, getting all those things, it wasn't strange for me.
Yes.
It fell in nicely.
So before we go on, for the benefits of our listeners, you could explain what is parliamentary privilege?
So parliamentary privilege is where you are protected from legal action when you make statements in the parliament. And this is why it comes back to whether you could lie in parliament. And the maxim is that you should not lie. You should not speak untruth. But whatever you say, you must be clear in your heart and in your mind that what you are saying is truth. Now there's a difference between the truth and your truth. Because if you are pulled before the privileges committee, right, you have to defend what you say. And you know, you try not to call names of persons in the public space.
Because
they can't respond to you. They cannot respond to you in the parliament. Now, if somebody feels that they have been unjustifiably accused of something in the public space, there is provisions in the standing order that they can write to the speaker and offer an explanation or to make a complaint about it. You can't do that. But you have no legal recourse. So this is why sometimes when politicians make comments standing on the floor, the man up will say, hey, come outside, say it outside on the pavement.
Yes.
Because you could get sued if you say some of those things. So again, it was designed for open conversation. Parliamentary privilege means that you shouldn't be afraid to say what you have to say, but it doesn't mean that you must lie.
Right.
So that is what parliamentary privilege is about.
So it's 2015.
Yes.
So we now understand who was the man that entered Parliament for the first time. So in our conversation so far, you spoke about empowerment. You spoke about empowerment. You spoke about giving the people, having solution-oriented individuals. You spoke about systems. But as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, you're hearing this from this fellow, and we're saying, but he should have known better, because politics in our culture does not augur well for those kind of qualities. So now we're moving forward, 2015 and forward. So, you as they would say, you entered there all excited, time progressed.
Yeah.
How was there a time where those values that you would have learned in Guaya Guayari and Mayaro has now started to conflict with your everyday functioning as a member of parliament in our political system?
Absolutely. I will tell you this. Politics is not for the faint of heart. You have to be prepared to give more than you get. If you are not prepared to give more than you gain, you stay out of it. You have to have duck feathers. You ever see when water hit duck, how it does roll off?
Yes.
You have to be able to take licks, blows. Don't matter what you do, Jelani, somebody outside there will vex with you. And you have to be committed to what you're doing. Did the things that drew me to Parliament come into conflict during the course of my parliamentary term? Absolutely. There's something called collective responsibility of cabinet. And when you're in opposition, there's collective responsibility
in caucus. Yeah.
I will tell you this, in fairness to Mrs. Prasad Bisasa, while I sat in her caucus, she was always very clear. She allowed every person to have an opinion on a matter. She would tell you, listen, if you have to go and vote, and you're not prepared to support the party, stay home. Don't come to the chamber and vote against the party. You have to be prepared to compromise. Politics is the art of compromising. I remember we were doing the marriage bill when we were going to synchronize the consensual age of sex
across the board
with the legal age to get married. So there were inconsistencies under the Hindu Marriage Act at 16, and some at 12, and some at 15. So the idea was that if you legally can get married at 18, I mean you shouldn't have sex before 18. A minor is anybody under the age of 18. I have 3 daughters, and I remember the Thursday evening I'm prepping for the debate on Friday. So I would normally bounce things off my daughters. They would say, Daddy, that green verb not sounding good. They're very, 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 peculiar when they're looking at the debates. And they say, how are you voting on that? I say, well, my personal view is that I am in full agreement. This is 20, I think it would be 17 or 18, somewhere around there. The world has changed. There are more avenues for women. In Victorian age, a 13-year-old was a big woman.
Yes.
A 13-year-old in Victorian times was a big woman.
Correct.
She could have gotten married. And dare I say, probably a 13, 14-year-old mentally may have been stronger and wiser than a 13 or 14-year-old today. Mm. That has to change. So I say, well, listen, at the end of the day, I have my view, but I am part of a party who has a particular view, who has a constituency that they represent, and then we have a duty to the country, and we'd have to find a middle ground. Well, them say, Daddy, if you vote for that bill, don't come home. And we obviously have to vote with the party at the end of the day. So yes, it comes into conflict. There will always be grey lines that you would have to traverse. But at some point in time, there are black lines that, in principle, you do not cross. And in the politics, in your day-to-day life, there'll be several of those.
Who sets those lines?
It has to be you, because, you see, the whole question of, you talk about integrity. You know, what is integrity? Integrity is what you're willing to go to sleep with in the night. In 2015, before I filed for the nomination, my father never wanted me to get involved in politics. As business people, we stay out of that. You know, you will lose and this. So my dad is watching me every night, 7 o'clock, jump in the car, go somewhere. Go in here, go in there. And he's watching, eh? But my wife, Nalisha, she's not going with me. So after a couple of weeks, he meets my mom and he says, "Hey, listen, I feel Russian have a woman outside. Because I see them leave the house every night. And then mommy told him, look, so and so is happening." That man was mad. I know when I went in, he was crazy.
So he would have preferred you to have the outside woman.
But it might be easier for him. You know? But what happened is that the night I won the seat, but we lost the elections. UNC would have lost in 2015. I reached home about 12:30. And let me tell you something about my contender in 2015, Clarence Ramarata. Clarence and I took blows from our parties for 5 years. He got blows because they find he was too close to me. And I get blows because they find I close to he. I was a pseudo PNM, closet PNM because of that. But understand this, Clarence Ramarata was a government minister. He sits in cabinet. I would have been a fool to have him as an enemy, politically, right? In the 5 years that I was MP, I got a lot of assistance from him. And the night I won the seat, by the time I got home, he calls. He says, "Rushton, I want to congratulate you. It was a good battle. It was a very interesting thing. You know, congratulations." And he reminded me that, you know, the doc, as you would have called Dr. Jelani, has promised that I would come into the Senate. And if I will lose, I will become a Minister of Agriculture and so on. And I will be here to help you. Right after I got that call, Daddy came upstairs. And he said, "Listen, I know that wasn't the result what you want. But I want you to promise me 2 things in your journey, whether it is 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. He says, balance your time. Do not divorce yourself from your family, from your constituency, from your God, and from your country. Find the balance, and you will survive this." Hence, I told him my wife comes with me everywhere. And secondly, he says, when you have to make a decision, ask yourself if your wife and your daughters will be happy with the decision. And if they will not be happy with the decision, do not do it. And I use that as a maxim in everything I do. My girls are in university away. How would they feel to see their father front page of the Express with a handcuff? How do they explain that to their professors and their friends and so on? And you know, these things remain in the back of your mind as you go along. Now, I am not saying that political parties are evil. I'm not saying that every single thing in the UNC while I was in there was something that I would have pushed back against. There are a lot of great things, a lot of good people inside there, a lot of bright people. My challenge when we had the internal elections is that I disagreed with how the leadership was managing the party, because when I take the perspective as a businessman, and I'll tell you this, Mrs. and I, one day we were chatting and, you know, we were disagreeing. And she said, "Rushton, we will always disagree because we are politicians and you are a businessman." And my response was that that is true, but both camps require us to manage people. And the management of people tells the success of your organization. You must put the right people in the right places with the right skill. Governance is a combination of systems made out of a number of processes, and each one with people to drive those processes. And as a business mandate, I always said that businesses will survive weak people. They will not survive a weak process, because you could change a weak person every Monday morning, but a weak process will damage the strongest individual that you have. So when you are organizing business and systems, you must make sure that your processes are sound. So even if you have to change somebody every Monday morning, that the next man who comes in, he can hit the ground running. So even in governance, even in your running of a country, if you're running of your ministries, your MPs who become cabinet ministers, they are policy directors. You don't need to be a subject matter
expert. Correct.
Or if you are, good. But leadership in a ministry requires you to take your government's policy position, work with your public office and say, guys, how can we do this? I have a mandate from the Prime Minister. The country has been going right. I want us to go left. How can you help me take the country left? You let the experts help you and say, well, you know, Minister, we could do this, we could do that. Sorry, what we need to change? What can I go back to cabinet and get for you? You want more money, you want more equipment, you want more people. And when you transfer that to your public officers, you let them win. You let them take the win and you run with it. And listen, if you get a Minister of Government who has the support of their public officers, that will be the most efficient ministry.
Correct.
Right? But there's an art and language, you know? That is the skill.
So I want to go back a little bit. You spoke about that night. I believe it would have been September 9th, somewhere around there, 2015, where your opponent called you, congratulated you, and said, hey, we're going to work together.
That's correct.
That's not the norm, and that is not politics in Trinidad and Tobago. That is not what we are accustomed to for the past 60 years. What is the value, or how much would we be in a different place if it is that our politicians, regardless of their political divide, still have that level of humanity, or that level of, in sports, they have the sportsman creed.
Yes.
You know, how is it that, one, we don't have that here, and what change, if we did, would Trinidad and Tobago be?
I'll tell you this. In my experience in 10 years, sitting in a caucus inside of the UNC, and even looking at the PNM under Dr. Rowley, it is unfortunate when you try to mimic your leaders. Nobody's perfect. We all have faults. Unfortunately, they say, monkey can't see the own tail. So I expect other people to say, Rushton, this is not looking good. You need to do this, you do that. And you have to be able to accept criticism. In the 11th Parliament, there was something that unique used to happen. And Faris Alwari, as Attorney General, Faris would bring these bills, and there will always be conversations about, getting these bills. But as a Minister of Government, you measure success, but if you could spend your budget allocation.
Yes.
But as an Attorney General, you have to pass bills.
Yes.
And I remember, because I used to sit next to Ganga Singh, and Ganga would disappear for a little while, and then all of a sudden a bill would come and there will be some agreements, and sometimes I see Faris would have gotten up and say, well, we will make amendments, and Dr. Rowley's watching like this. Where's that one? So I knew there was something happening where we could have gotten a say on how the bills were being done, and then the AG gets an opportunity to get his bill passed. And that is the way how the governance ought to work. In the 12th Parliament, Ganga was no longer there. And then within a short space of time, Faris was removed. And I saw no collaboration between the PNM and the UNC on fundamental things. Now, I do believe that we can disagree on a lot of things. But fundamental things, issues on crime, on the economy, and so on, those things require some maturity. But you see, we sink ourselves in the sand with something called one-upsman. I must always have this one-ups on you, and that happens at the detriment of the people of the country. Because if we're only looking at the one-ups, who is benefiting, And the political maturity that is required. And let me tell you, a lot of work gets done in the Parliament. I mean, on a Friday is the arena day. That is the show. You have to show your constituents that you are there, you are real, and you're fighting for them. So you have to come out fighting on all cylinders. But when you come back to joint select committees, then a lot of the work gets done. And you have a lot of bipartisan approaches at joint select committees. And I remember I sat on about 4 or 5 committees with colleagues from opposite, and we worked together on the cannabis bill. We've done things on the fishing bills, and there was always good work. It's just on Friday it is the show. But that is okay. As long as we get the work done and you have the maturity, more so, issues on bills, on anti-crime bills and so on. And I always had a particular position that we ought to support good legislation as long as it doesn't trample on severe constitutional rights of the citizen, because we play a dangerous role. Do you know Trinidad and Tobago is the only country in the whole of Caribbean, on the whole of the Caribbean, that has this Section 4 and 5 of our Constitution, or what you call the Bill of Rights. Jamaica doesn't have it, Barbados doesn't have it, Guyana doesn't have it. They don't need a 3/5 majority to pass certain bills. We got that built into the Constitution in the transition phase, because there was so much of, how you put it, boy, you know, no trust because of the issues of the East Indian Party, the African Party. When we went to Marlborough House, there was so much of things that the service we have to fix. Why did we ended up with so much of service commission? It's because we wanted to have a bird's eye view and have this separate, because we felt whoever in government, they will take advantage of certain things. Again, trust is this big thing. And if we have to move forward as a country, we need to have politicians whose voices that the country can trust. Again, we have a lot of people. I think there are a lot of good people in the system. There are a lot of good people in the politics. There are a lot of good people outside of the politics. And we need to raise the level of trust. We need to see the country now. So we have some headwinds coming with this Iran and America war that is going to last for months into a year or more. And it's going to upset the global order. And there are some good positives for us. I recently wrote an article about that, about when, you know, this thing is happening in Asia, we need to take advantage of it on the Atlantic region. But there are things that we need to brace for. And you know, the state must be having the conversation from now. You know, I always say that saying yes is easy, you know. Saying no is difficult. And when I have to give you bad news, I must hold your hand and walk you through it. As leaders in the country, I must be able to listen, Doc, it's going to be a little tough for the next 12 or 24 months, but you know what? At the end of it, we will accomplish A, B, C, D. We will look after the most vulnerable in the society. We will look after them. We will think of it, but we got to walk down this road together, you know?
So let's look at this, because you trust.
Yes.
Let's look at the last general election. From an objective point of view, you would see that you would have had one political party that would have said exactly what you say. Hey, we can't do news. Yeah. We can't do this because X, Y, and Z. And then you have another political party or entity that would have said otherwise. The population went to the polls, and they would have gone to the side that said you could get where you want, right? Now, so this begs the question, is it that, meaning, let me just continue that thought, so that a political entity was rewarded by the population.
Right.
So the things that we are accusing our politicians of, all of the negatives that we don't like, isn't it that our politicians are more so responding to what the population wants? I'll put it the next way. Or is it that, or another way is, our politicians, are they more so a symptom of the population and not necessarily the ones that are driving the issues?
So what you're asking there really is, are we better off with a populist government? Now, a populist government is one that takes every single public issue and runs with it. Because people complaining that the sky too blue, we go legislate to cut down the amount of blue. We want to be able to, you know, we say gambling bad, we go shut down bars, we go raise the price. Now, what you do, you're pandering to the population because you feel if you give every section what they want, you're going to get the votes. But that may be good, but every single decision has a long-term impact. And I want to use the example of what I think was a very ill-conceived strategy of the current administration to raise issues around like bar licenses and so on. And, you know, they complain about alcoholism and whatever. Those things are personal choices. We need to do more to prevent people. But when you put these, I mean, the taxes for these bars and so on went from $1,800 to about $9,000. A lot of them are closing down. when you have the increase in alcohol at the same time, alcohol, when you look at the restaurant industry and so on, what it normally is a lot more people choose, hey, you can't spend that $25, but every still we go buy something, which is good financially for the family. But understand what is happening to the real estate market. When these businesses can't run, they go and lay off people, right? And you're laying off vulnerable people, because a lot of these people in these restaurant industries, single mothers, students looking to make some hours to pay for their tuition, and then when they can't operate, they close down. And when the real estate closes down, then you have a bunch of real estate that is idle. And I'll tell you this, your economy is built on a strong real estate market, a rental market. There was a reason why post-COVID, Facebook and Google and all these big companies, they instructed employees to come back to the office because they couldn't afford for the real estate market to collapse. If these buildings remain unused, what happens? And they said, you know what, we need to bring back people home. So there's this argument about working from home, which is critical, but there is components of the economy that must remain strong. So for instance, a company like Guardian has a portfolio which is cash, insurance, real estate. Your investment in your insurance or your pension hinges on companies paying their rent for these properties that is owned by Guardian. When you do something that collapses those markets, what happens to your pension? What happens to your insurance premiums? What happens to those things? So sometimes when we are building solutions from a strategic perspective, we can't just look for the immediate gain. What is the long-term effect? What is the long-term effect of these things? And when you have small businesses closing, small businesses in communities, they support sports, they support the All Force team, they support. So you have a crash of critical community development components. And those things I feel have not been thought out properly. And I think those things are going to come back to haunt us in a year's time as these things start to take effect from some of the decisions that have been made.
But no, it's interesting what you said, because I wondered in the American system, why is it that this current administration, they insisted that the federal workers had to go back to work. I said, but America is supposed to be the ground zero for innovation, and But I now understand the spill effect. But let's look at this though. So we're going back to the populist agenda. So you have. I understand what you're saying, and I understand, okay, if it is that I may give you this, look at how it's going to affect you later down the road. But our society, and this is not only Trinidad and Tobago, this is the Caribbean and the world, especially social media has caused this, or that instant gratification. So you're asking a society now that has grown accustomed to instant gratification. If I feel for KFC now, I can order it and it will come here now. Or in half an hour, or whatever is the case. And now you're now asking them that, hey, let us now consider these issues. Yes, you may want it now, but we have to hold for about 5-10 years before we could. A politician going to the population to tell them that they're going to be chased out of office.
So it is because of the system. If, in my view, that 5-year cycles of governance don't work for us in the Caribbean. I'll tell you, in the United States, while they have 4-year terms of presidential elections, their governance systems are multi-tiered. Yeah. They have 7-year systems, they have 15-year systems. Their economics through the Federal Reserve is on a 30-year cycle. So what you have is, when you have a change of administration in the United States, you have some components of economic governance that stays because it's on a cycle driven by other factors. You come into government in we had a government change in 2025. You spend 2 years just trying to get your feet into ministries, getting systems in place. In the 3rd year, you start to get things done, and in the 4th year, start preparing for the next election. Perhaps a 7-year cycle might be more suited to give a better performance of a government of the day. In terms, you get time to make changes. What is detrimental for us is our system of state boards and so on. We have, every time a government changes, you have a complete wipe of boards. India solved that problem. India created their state enterprise manual where you have 7-year cycles for boards. So the government have representatives, the opposition have representatives, the president have a representative, and then private sector has. And they all on separate cycles. So even if you have a government change, you have continuity on certain state enterprises. They may have a little shift based on the new government in terms of policy direction, but you have institutional knowledge being carried. We have another fundamental problem in our system as well. Very good technical people not going to go on a political platform to get into government, to get into a cabinet. So we may have a bunch of good people, but non-technical people at a cabinet level. Canada used to have that problem. Canada changed their constitutional arrangements where they could have made a junior minister of cabinet appointed from the public service to sit in cabinet. So now, just using these names as a wide reference, you have someone like a Robert Riley who has tremendous experience in the energy sector. Robert may not want to go on a political platform and total a political hat and go to the polls. But Robert's sitting with a Minister of Energy at a junior cabinet level to guide a technical conversation on policy direction. It adds value to the overall implementation of policies at a sound technical level. We know from the cabinet level, from time we sit down to talk, look at the thesis. I'm not sure if you're familiar with what a cabinet note looks like.
I saw a little glimpses. What?
A cabinet note is like a mini thesis.
Right.
Is that I must say, listen, I want to build this building.
Mm-hmm.
This is what it's going to cost. This is the benefit. This is how we are going to benefit. This is how the country is going to benefit. These are the pros and cons. And I'm sending to my colleagues. I need everybody to take a look at it and then we'll vote on it. So cabinet notes has to be well researched, right? When you have a minister who has some technical experience, you can bypass a lot of stuff. So, I mean, we have to find ways to fix these things in our constitution that is not helping us progress. I have a saying, I say, we are a 19th century parliamentary system trying to service a 21st century audience, but we are confined and constrained by a Cold War relic called the Civil Service Act. And if we are not prepared to take that bull by the horn and sit with unions in this country and have fundamental changes, because customs and excise, port operations, globally there are 24 operations. We cannot be competitive with an 8 to 4 Monday to Friday operation at the port levels, because we are competing globally for trade, for new markets, and that's a bugbear today for business. We talk to all the chambers and so on. I mean, customs and excise always having issues, and these are fundamental structural issues that they talked to us while we were in opposition. I remember one senior person in customs told me, he said, well, Mr. Paray, when they send me 50 new people, you know what I get? I get 50 people close to retirement. They can't climb a ladder, they can't board a boat. So what you send them for? You send them to retire at a senior level, to get a nice pension. That is not helping the organization. If you send me 50 new young fellas who could climb a ladder, board a boat, do a search, those are fundamental things that we have to address and we have to fix. And sometimes it requires liaising with unions, and our unions are antiquated. I remember Watson Duke was on an interview a day with Fazir Mohammed, and he was negotiating for their increases. And so Fazir said, listen, I'm hearing all that you're saying, but I want you to say that I am going to ask for an honest day's pay, and we will give you an honest day's work. What your response was? He said, listen, that's a functional management partner. We're here to manage people, which is right. That management has to manage people, manage the resource. We are here to negotiate terms and conditions and salaries, which is absolutely correct. But when you look at a 21st century union who has to deal with AI, the factory floor, we're going to have reduced employment. How are we going to legislate now in the next 3 years to soften the blow from AI integration? Also, we're going to retrain people in the public service. None of these things are a language that we are talking now for the next 5 years, because AI is here. The factory floor is going to change. We have to modernize port operations. Seamen and Waterfront Trade Union, I've asked Michael, and he said, hey, what are we going to do? What are you putting in place? How are we going to change the way how people are going to be affected in these operations? What is your new audience? People in technology have no union. Perhaps you need to find a space for us who in ICT to have a unionized system now. So all of these conversations I would have had as MP with different people. But unfortunately, you have to be in government to drive those things. But it is nonetheless very, very important, I do believe that we are not irreparable. No, I think we are very fixable in this country. But you need sound leadership that is driven by policy, by, as I said, systems, processes, and people. And this is why I say I think the era for leadership in this country requires a business person. I mean, I'm blowing my horn, it could be anybody, yes. Right? Because we've had the eras of engineers, we have the eras of lawyers. Mm-hmm. I think we need to have business take a lead.
Or a medical doctor. But, I think that if we were to take the transcript of this podcast and we would come up with what is the number one word that you would have said, systems would come up. And we have a kind of understanding as to what you mean. But I want to, and you stated that, many of our issues is, you could have failed leadership, but if it is that you have a failed system, it will cause a recurrent problem. I've heard many of the changes that you're talking. Now, in terms of Trinidad and Tobago as a system, what are we doing, or what is that one thing that we are doing wrong in constructing our system of government, or our system of operations, or how it is that we view things, how we bring up our children? What is that? What are we doing wrong?
My view, having been inside a governmental system, not being in government, but I've been inside the governmental system, I've observed 2 terms of the PNM and its policy directions. I observed the UNC in its first, in its People's Partnership term from 2010 to 2015. My pet peeve is that we turn political manifestos into national policy.
Yes.
And the problem I have with that is that a political manifesto is a menu list of things that I am going to do. And when you turn that into national policy, there are a few areas that remain vacant. One, what is the interconnectivity between what you want to do? How does one relate to the other from a philosophical perspective? I want to give you an example. The Ministry of Agriculture. Ministry of Agriculture gets a budget of about, recurrent expenditure budget of about $900 million. They get a developmental budget of about $500 million, and they probably get something in the IDF for about another $200 million. So what it tells me is that it is costing the ministry $1 billion to spend $700 million. So that's a fundamental problem. How can it cost me $1 billion to spend $700 million? I have always spoken inside our little caucus that perhaps we need to get rid of a Ministry of Agriculture. Why? Because from a philosophical view, agriculture is dealing with food. In the next 5 to 10 years, food is going to be a national security issue. Water is going to be a national security issue. People take on national security in a way they take on agriculture. What if we were to take the Ministry of National Security back then and make departments of food security, department of water security? So as we have climate change and we have all these things that are happening, we can now see funding with a little more focus. And we can take that $1 billion that we're spending just spend it on agriculture and start putting it into developmental projects, put it into developmental things for water retention, pond water banks, because we are going to have problems with climate change, resiliency in crops and so on, food issues, and with these trade issues that are going to come just now with all shipping. But those are the things we need. And just use an example how, we need to relook at systems, how we mount systems together. How do we change? How does tourism and community development connect? You know, how do we use local tourism to train our people for an international barrage of tourists? How do we get Port of Spain to decentralize its port operations down to Point Vistas, down to Point Fortin, down to Galuta, leave Port of Spain for cruise ships? How do we tell Royal Caribbean and those guys, listen, have berthing operations, we will sell you the berthing operation, like you go to an American Airlines terminal in the States, it's branded American Airlines. Yeah. We give you access. How do we build Port of Spain to become the new cultural and entertainment capital and decentralize everything back to municipal corporations or government? Now, listen, those are topics that we can talk, because I've been lamenting these things for 10 years when we speak in the budget debates. And again, you talk about the systems. If we don't put systems that are based on a philosophy, why do we want to decentralize? You know why we want to decentralize? Because I want a mom and a dad not to have to leave home 4 o'clock in the morning to go to Port of Spain to work. And then a nanny who may have never born a child has to come home to make breakfast for your child, get them to school. And when you come back 6 o'clock in the evening, you're tired. You can't do homework. You have to hug up your wife or your husband once for the month. There's a breakdown in family. So from a philosophical perspective, I am decentralizing because I want to increase family time. And when I increase family time, I want green space for them. I want them to go in the park. I want them to walk. I want a father to take the 2 children 5 o'clock in the evening and walk in the park, run, jump. You know, so when we make a political manifesto, which is a menu of things I'm going to do without a philosophy behind it, or what is the end result I want, then we run for 5 years, and every time we think we check a box, you know, we give you stand your ground legislation, but to what end? We are giving you this, we are giving that, but to what end? What have we done in the last 1 year of a new administration that has started a change in the direction of where we ought to be? So we're fighting up every day. Who's going to get US currency? Fighting up for the system who we're getting, but we are solving the philosophical problem where we're going to earn more money from. And that is what we're going to be paying attention to. So just to answer your question quickly, if you don't have a philosophical background on every arm of governance that you want, and you fill it with systems and you fill it with processes, and you don't have the philosophy, what you want to accomplish in 3 or 5 years, we will keep going, spinning top in mud. And that is, you know.
So, we're moving along. Sure. 2015, Rushton Paray, Member of Parliament, businessman, and as time progresses, would have built now the more political experience. And Rushton Paray, understanding the importance of systems, collective responsibility, understanding how things interconnect with one another, decided that, you know what, in my political organization, I believe that I can bring the change that is necessary. And well, we know the outcome of that. I want to get to that point though, because, you know, as a politician, as a citizen looking up, I think almost everybody understands collective responsibility, understanding towing the line. Yeah. And you didn't toe the line. How was that experience? What was the mismatch?
So a man reached out to me there and he says, Rushton, you know, I'm real sorry, you know, you're not in the system, you would have been a good minister of this and that, but you all made a bad choice. And my response to him, who told you we had a choice? When you are in political organizations, and I don't know of the PNM's constitution, but I've read the UNC's constitution on several occasions. Prior to the internal elections, you never heard Rushton Paray come out in the open and wash dirty laundry in the public. An internal election for your national executive is a constitutional mandate. Every member of the party, from captain to cook, is entitled to put their hat in the ring. When the cycle came, I, plus a few of my colleagues, who were in alignment with how I was thinking, said, look, we are not happy with the way the current executive is leading and advising the political leadership of the party. This had nothing to do with Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, by the way. This was not an election. This was not a campaign against her. It was for the national executive. We put forward a plan. So during our campaign, there was no attack on personalities. There was no attack on people. There was about how are we going to change the look and the feel of the UNC in terms of things that we felt needed to be done to prepare us for government, right? Because your political party, the stability of it determines the stability of your government. If you can digitize your party, you will digitize government. If you can capitalize your party, you will capitalize government. Whatever fingerprint you put on your political party, it transcends to how you would run government. And we felt in the time that we were there that the fingerprints that we wanted were not there. So there was a constitutional reason. We didn't go outside of anybody else and make bacchanal. We chose the constitutional road. Some things happened and we were not successful. And right after, we went back to business. But you see, one of the challenges when you are working with weak people, several things were said about me. Okay, they call me a P&M operative. They say I come to mash up the party. One of my colleagues on the platform said that he knew that I received $500,000 from a P&M financer to mash up the party. And I mean, political talk on the platform, that's fine. So one reporter asked me, they said, Rushton, you know, you're not responding to any of these things. I said, well, there's nothing to respond to. I said, and on top of that, Mrs. Prasad says, Dr. Munilal, and they are my seniors in the party. The work that they have done for this country over the last 20, 30 years, I can't start to do it. And I have the greatest respect in the world for both individuals. And I will not respond to foolishness. And we go on. And, you know, sadly, there are those people who took that to mean that we were attacking the party and we were attacking. I had an idea that we would have lost, right? I was under no illusions of grandeur that we were going to win this thing because we know the challenge in internal party politics. But a commentary came from a retired principal who I suppose a very intelligent person would have shaped hundreds of minds. And the comment was that she rather lose with Mrs. Prasad than win with Paray. I couldn't understand the logic, you know, because we all want to win, we want to drive change, you have to be in government to drive change. But for a sensible person to make a comment like that they rather lose with Mrs. Prasad than win with Paray. And I realized, but if that is the thinking of the masses inside the UNC, we're running up a brick wall. And, you know, so said, so done. I mean, we still got close to about 4,000 votes, which was the most among the votes any challenge ever got. I mean, we got more votes than Dr. Munilal and even Mr. Vasan Barra, the two times that he challenged. Yeah. I wouldn't say it was Rushton Paray got the vote. We had a good team. You had, you know, Ms. Haynes, you had, you know, Dr. Ragbir, you had Rodney Charles, you know, my colleagues who were on the slate, plus some new faces, all who were very active members of the UNC as well. And not for one day we would disrespect it. Anyway, I think if it was a general election, we might have won because we had the entire country behind us. Because they saw a different language. They saw what is possible in the UNC, right? And that is still possible. As I keep telling everybody that, you know, to me, that the philosophy of the UNC laid out by Mr. Pandey many, many years ago, when I was first drawn as an observer to politics in 1986, those things are still there. I have problems with, you know, how the organization is being run. And as a member, I have a right to complain.
Correct.
I choose to complain during a constitutionally run election. I don't complain before. So, fellas as well, Paray, when you're inside there, you was inside the thing there for 10 years, you couldn't complain, but there's collective responsibility. I can tell you, we have very aggressive arguments inside of the caucus from time to time. But that doesn't mean from the time you come out of the caucus, you run outside.
Yeah.
And you tell everybody who vexed with who.
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of discipline.
Correct.
But during an election campaign, you have to go in the public. But you have to measure your language as well. Because you don't want to fight for something but pelting boulders on it. So we're fighting, right, for the party, but we launching boulders to mash up the institution. You can't do that.
Correct.
And that is how, we kind of gauge how we wanted to do this thing,
So, given all of this, reflecting on your life, reflecting on all of the experiences, if you were able to go back in time and speak to young Rushton, what would you tell him? What piece of advice would you tell him?
Oh, I would tell him, just do exactly what you did. I'll tell you this now. In 10 years as an MP, there was not one day that I was unhappy with the job. No matter, you had some people who would have been very aggressive, If I got one thing accomplished out of 10, I took it at heart. Nothing burdened me as an MP. Nothing. I mean, I spent a lot of my own money, by the way. I can tell you, it's not a cheap job.
People don't see that part, huh?
They don't see that part. I can tell you, people feel as MPs that we eat free and we drink free and you tax free. No, you pay for it. You pay for the Prado as well, right? You have to pay for everything. You get a pension, you pay for that. You get medical, you pay for that. So I can tell you in 10 years, out of the salary as an opposition MP, which is about $17,500, I mean, dino money, you understand? And you spend, they say opposition MPs are temporary, but you are
part-time,
full-time.
correct.
Part-time, but you are full-time.
Correct.
And I can tell you, by the time you finish, pay for groceries, pay for hampers, pay for medical stuff for old people. Sometimes, I mean, we had 3 offices because of the size of the constituency. But you get a $8,500, I think, for 3 offices. Man, my 3 offices cost me about $18,000 a month. So you got to take money out of your pocket to run these offices. But again, none of that frustrated me, because to see families get through, you look at elderly people who are having problems in the hospital system. And another thing too, just very, very quickly, people feel that the function of an MP is road and drain. It is not. I can tell you, road and drain and infrastructure were the smallest part of the job. We would have on a daily basis issues of domestic violence, issues of people with personal problems, legal issues, family legal issues, officers who want transfers, people who feel that, in the job they've been,
ostracized.
And I mean, there are a lot of things we can't talk about. There are things that has to remain private and confidential within the office system as well. I had to deal with an issue. A day a lady comes and she says, MP, I need a job. I said, well, what you looking for? She said, if I could get something in URP or CPAP. I said, well, I could try, I could make a few calls. So she breaks down and she cries and she says she needs a job because she needs to leave the house. I said, why are you leaving the house for? She says that her husband is offshore for 21 days. And when he comes back, the police is going to lock him up. So why are they going to lock him up? She said because the 13-year-old daughter was diagnosed with HIV and the father has been having sexual relationships with the child. That changes the whole scope of the conversation. Immediately I got on the phone. I called the head of the URP office in Iroquois and I say, this is my situation and I need your help. And she got the job and whatever, and the child was removed from the road. I think the matter is probably still in court and so on. But obviously, these kind of cases don't come out in the public domain. But the point that I wanted to make is that the role of the MP and the satisfaction you get when you get things done, it really, it smooths out the things that you don't like. So if I had to tell young Rushton, whether to remain on the same trajectory, I would tell Rushton, yes. I would probably tell him to work a bit more on compromising. Perhaps I could have done a bit more compromising without, getting into the black areas or the dark areas. I think everything that I would have done while being an officer, I did it with the best interest of the people of Mayaro at heart, and there was not one day down that I ever asked anybody who come to my office who you vote for, or whether you vote for me or you didn't vote for me. There was one instant, a lady met me by the doubles man, and she said, well, MP, I came to your office the other day, I wanted some help with an agency house. But the girl in your office told me that I wasted my time better you apply for land for the landless. So I said, well, which one of the girls sold you that? So after she described it, I went back to her and said, listen, I said, make this the first time and the last time. I said, you know what we're in the business of in this office? She said, well, what you mean? I said, when you go to the restaurant, what the restaurant in the business of? Food and rum. When you go in the doctor's office, in the business of medical. I said, when you come to the MP's office, we are selling hope. We're in the business of hope. I say, it's not your job to tell people you can't get this and you can't get that. I say, we will write 100 letters, we will knock on doors, and we will do our best to get the person assistance. You can't tell them, I said, do I ever do that again? The lady come in there and she asked for some help for some food or whatever, I write her a note to send her by Passage to get her groceries and so on. One flying to her and said, MP, I see you give that lady a note, but you know, they tote flag for clearance for the thing. I said, but that has nothing to do with me. I will judge on a case-by-case basis who I will help and who I can't help. And would one or two people fool me? Absolutely. You understand that? But the thing about it is that on the office door, at my office at the coat of arms, it didn't have a Balize, I didn't have a UNC Rising Sun, it had the coat of arms. And I knew my job when I became the MP. I became the MP for everybody, even the people who didn't vote for me. Right? So I knew my function well, and I lived by that credo. I took the value systems that my father instilled, the entrepreneurship, values from my parents, my understanding of people growing up in a multicultural community in terms of religion, in terms of reaching out to people. Take my leadership experience from 20 years in the energy sector, understanding systems, being an IT professional, driving that in my constituency, and you bundle all of that. I have absolutely no regret, and I'm just sorry that I couldn't continue in the current state, and I was prepared to be sidelined and wait my return, wait for my comeback at some point in time.
This naturally leads to our next segment, which we call Rapid Blue. And before we get that, what is still on my mind is that business of hope. Mm-hmm. I love that concept. Yeah. So, Rapid Blue, I'm going to ask you a question, and the first response that comes to your mind, that's the answer that you want. So, you let me know when you're ready.
Yeah. Keep it G-rated.
All right. So, what is the most dangerous cliche in Caribbean leadership?
Most dangerous cliche in Caribbean leadership? I will tell you, probably not Caribbean leadership. I would probably bring it back home. I think a dangerous concept is the concept of Trinidad time. There's a quote that my daughter shared with me the other day, that time is a colonial relic, and that when you're in the Caribbean and you have a more softer approach, it is how we develop a culture of love and music, and that is what the people from away want. So my daughter said, she said, Daddy, what do you think about this? And I said, well, look, it has its space, but the world today is governed by time. Satellite time, TV time, commercial time, discipline, military, GPS, everything operates via time. And if we want to strengthen systems, processes, our appreciation of time, and let me tell you, in politics, I think politicians have no respect for time.
It's a suggestion.
None at all. It is thankfully in the parliament, you have a level of discipline inside it. If you come too late, they mark you as absent. Yeah. But, there are things in Caribbean culture that will work, but we must modernize. And I think for me, the issue around timing is critical, and how we approach issues of timing and processes. We must stick to time. Don't tell me we start at 9 and quarter to 10, still knocking coffee. Yeah. Value people's time.
Yes. Logic or loyalty? Which one is more expensive to maintain in politics?
Loyalty is very expensive to maintain. But what is loyalty? I believe that I don't want you to be loyal to me in the flesh. I want you to be loyal to my ideas or my ideal. Because my ideas and my ideal will last longer than me. So if I have to cross a line that I feel it is going to interrupt my relationship with people, that idea or that ideal must be something worth fighting for. So to me, loyalty is very expensive. But be loyal to an idea, an ideal that will last time. The man go dead, but the idea will remain, or the ideal will remain. And that is what I want loyalty for. Be loyal to the idea or the ideal, not necessarily the man.
I like that. The ICT sector in Trinidad and Tobago, is it a frontier or just a retail shop for foreign tech?
So right now, I think the vast majority is retail shop. If I am understanding what you mean by retail shop. So when we say that we want to do digital transformation, we take all the paperwork and we put it on our website. That is not digital transformation. One of the biggest problems we have in this country is, so we're way behind the 8 ball. We're way behind our Caribbean neighbors. We're way behind the rest of the world. I think the time for piecemeal is done. We need to have, some changes overnight, over the weekend. You wake up and you're learning. But the problem is that we come back to philosophy. Digital transformation is less about technology and more about people. If we can transform people to accept and use, we're going nowhere. There are still people that are afraid to use an ATM. Or they can't use an ATM. There are people like that. Why does we still have 4,000 pensioners lining up by the bank at the end of the month to get money? Yeah. Something is wrong there. So like we have this wonderful tool we released the other day, Ministry of Digital Transformation, Anansi. So you can get a lot of information from Anansi. But then it stops there. What I want the AI to do is to walk me through the process, allow me to file the paperwork, allow me to pay it online. I don't have to see a government officer. I'll give you a simple solution that we've done lately in our own business. So we have quite a bit of customers who buy our technology services, so we service them after hours. Now, many years ago, I have to put a team of guys, about 4 or 5 guys, overnight from 6 in the evening to 6 the next morning, at a call center taking calls. Today, I use an AI agent. So after 4:30, if you call my service desk, an AI agent will answer. It will ask your name, the company, and they will ask you what's the problem. And they will try to troubleshoot because we've uploaded all the manuals, technical manuals in the element. And if it can't help you, it logs a ticket. And whoever is the guy on duty, he gets a ticket and everybody has an SLA. That cost me $20 US a month, compared to paying $10,000 per month. Per month, yeah. So, and it's a single step process, right? Now I'm saying, if we need to transform government service, you can't tell me download the paper and sign it and bring it back. Yeah. If a US visa is the most complicated thing to get in the world and you could do the whole thing online. Yeah. Listen, getting a passport, getting an ID card, getting a driver's permit, I should be able to walk into a supermarket, go up to a kiosk, press Ministry of Work and Transport, I want to renew my driver's permit. Slip in my old one, it asks me to update my information if anything changes, pay me $200, and it give me a day to go pick up the new license because I want to have 20 machines all over the place. Correct, yeah. And it tell me come Monday even at 1 o'clock, and in 5 minutes you get it because I want to renew my permit a day. The process itself took 7 minutes, but the waiting time was 4 hours and a half. So you see the issue here, you have transformational issues, you have acceptance issues, and then the length of time it takes in government service. So by the time we put out a tender for an upgrade to version 4, by the time the money ready and it comes, we're on version 10. Yeah. So you're always buying old technology. And we're getting nowhere. So retail shop for now, we need transformational leadership in that sector right now. Bold leadership.
Mayaro's greatest untapped assets, is it physical or is it human?
Right now, I would tell you it's physical. If you take a bird's eye view of Mayaro, Mayaro has 17 miles of pristine beaches. We have 2 natural swamp systems. We have 2 world-class, FIFA-class football grounds. We have a financial system with banks. We have excellent telecommunications. We can do a lot better with our water systems. We have two main arteries, one from south, one from north, coming into Mayaro. We have investment capitalization, as I mentioned to you before, of almost $200 million in private sector investment. Now you tell me, if you are taking a bird's eye view of Mayaro versus Maruga versus Maracas, where you're going to put your money? If you have to, you put it in Mayaro. And when you look at the development that is going to come, when you look at the exploration that is coming, and I'll tell you, if ExxonMobil, their seismic survey comes back, which what I expect is going to come back positive from all the research that I've done and the information that I have, is that that deep water block may be sitting on probably 15 or 20 billion barrels of oil. We could have a resurgence of Trinidad and Tobago back in the 1970s. But you need good leadership to manage that. We don't want to make the mistakes that we've made. And even if the national economy is struggling, Mayaro is going to do well because it has the best opportunity for GDP growth at the end of the day.
You still have space in Mayaro for people to come and live?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And bring your money when you come in.
So my last two questions. What is the cost of entry for technocrats in this tribal landscape of politics?
Political entry is, to me, it is flawed based on loyalty. I am aware that people pay for seats, they pay to be representatives and so on. Whether that is something new or the norm, I don't know. I don't think the system allows the best people to present themselves. I think like in the US system where there is a promotion capacity where you start as a local government representative and then you can become the president of the United States. I am saying from the political party system is that your activism must be in a system governed by the party. The best activists should become the local government councillors. The best local government councillor should become the chairman of the corporation. The chairman of the corporation should be the next candidate to become the MP, and the best MP should be the next prime minister. So there is a career path for those of you who want to go down that road. So you have a system, but today, because of no system, sometimes you have to go in parish shop and find parish son and ask him if he want to be the MP. And if he says the right thing, probably puts out the right amount of money, then he gets a chance to go up for the election. But then you may have men who has been in the tunnels and in the dugouts a lot longer than me, whose natural transition should have been to be the candidate to be the MP. So I'm not saying that I didn't want the opportunity. But to me, if you want to get from your activist level to have a vision of growth in a political organization, whether you're a technocrat or not, that there must be a career path to leadership. And then somebody asked me if I would like to be prime minister one day, and I said yes. They said, hey boy, will you say that for? But you go shoot yourself. I said, well, which police constable doesn't want to be commissioner of police one day?
Yes.
So those are the little things that, I think it stifles the growth. But there is always the price that you have to pay for those things, but the systems are bad. And this is why sometimes the best people, and if the best people not ending up at the candidate level, the best people is not going to end up at the cabinet level.
Correct.
And we're suffering that sometimes.
So, 2025, for Trinidad and Tobago, would you say it was a turning point or it was the treadmill for basically our demise? And not because of the outcome, but the trajectory.
I am a numbers person, and I felt that even today that the UNC won an election, 28 seats, with about 15,000 more votes than we got in 2020. Was that a mandate to govern? It gave you governors. But was it a mandate to govern? I don't think so. When you look at the PNM numbers, the PNM lost about 110,000 votes. That votes did not go to the UNC, it stayed home. it told me that the PNM as an organization lost that communication and contact level with their people, with their support base. And they spoke loudly and they stayed home. To me, in the UNC, I would take that fact and be very careful how my policies are going to be outlaid. Because I can go and say, yeah, we win 28 seats. But was that a mandate to govern? Because we want to remain in government for 3 terms or 2 terms. If you really want to do something, you have to be there to 2 terms. I want to
minimum.
get anything done. Mm-hmm. But I have to be careful because there's a bunch of people, 3/4 of the population, they support me. How do we manage these things appropriately? You know, at the end of the day, I do not think it was a demise. I think the population was I think they were tired with how, as I say, the PNM policies were hitting the ground. I always, I used to joke about this in the parliament that, you know, the PNM was like a broken clock. At least they write twice for the day. You know, they did not get everything wrong. I think one of the biggest challenges that I had was with, you know, Dr. Rowley. And I would say Doc sometimes he has a problem. Doc didn't know how to play cricket, he know how to play scooch. Now in scooch, you pelt a ball and you duck. But in cricket, you have to have a run-up. And I think Doc did not have a good run-up. So he pushed people, he pushed the language, he pushed the communications away because of run-up. Just let me give you a quick example. Remember when he had this town hall meeting and the lady asked him about, you know, the daughters and so on, and he said something about, you know, making good choices, you know, pick your man wisely. Now in the normal setting, there wasn't anything wrong, he said. You understand? I mean, we have to have good choices when you're selecting a companion. But he said it in scooch, he pelt, and he ducked. Now, if it was me, the run-up would have been if I was Dr. Rowley, and that question came to me and said, listen, ma'am, as Prime Minister, as the head of the National Security Council in this country, as a father, I don't want another woman or child hurt in this country. But I can't do it alone. This is why I need your help. Moms, I need you to sit with your daughters. And I need you to tell them, transfer your wisdom to them about good choices. And fathers, you're not getting away now. On a weekend, take your sons, go wash the car, do something with them. While you talk with them, tell them about how we respect women in this country. Respect your mother, respect your sisters. And if all of us work together, we can deal with this. Oh, it's the same thing you say, choose your man wisely, but you take it, run upon it. And I think even the latest shenanigan which I would talk about, again, he made a very good point. He made a point. If you have allegations that under my leadership, drugs money built Balize House, under my leadership there were pedophiles in the PNM, bring the evidence to the police. Now to me that was a reasonable response. But when you use the term, which we will not say, then the media carry that, which was of no value. You know, and to me, people rejected that. So the UNC got a good opportunity to take the country forward. You know, they had some good ideas, they have some good plans, they have a good amount of good people within their ranks. As I say, some of my colleagues I've worked with for 10 years who are professionals in what they do. But I don't know, I've been out of the system for a year, I don't know internally how it's manifesting. But as an observer, and probably you might see something that I can't see, but I look at every ministry and ministerial portfolio, and I'm saying, while I didn't expect everything to be fixed in 1 year, at least somebody could tell me, where is the trajectory we're going to take national security in the next 2 years, 3 years? We're going to take the Ministry of Trade. What is the new investment opportunities? You know, where's the new markets going to come from? You know, in health, how are we going to reform the health sector? How are we going to improve customer service? Now, we could be articulating these things all now, and 3 years down the road, we'll see some improvement. But you're not saying that. We have a system where there is about $6 billion in cash in the commercial banking system. It means that people, there's been a reduction, so there's been some borrowing, but not borrowing at the domestic level. For us to drive the economy, we need local investments, new business, create new jobs. We need to get that cash out of the system. But if the government is not articulating confidence, I go leave my money in the bank and collect my 1.5% and stay happy until something happens.
Yes.
But if we have to drive the economy, the government must be articulating a position to increase confidence. Not when you have a state enterprise. Well, watch one of the largest employer in the country and say, listen, either you pay more for gas or we shutting off your gas. This is not North Korea. This is not Pyongyang. Right? No state monopoly must ever tell a business sector, especially one of the largest hirers in this country, that if you pay more, I'm going to turn off the gas. That to me was a fundamental flaw in how we do business, because the international community, man who wants to invest, capital is covered. Capital is going to go where the best returns is and people will be safe. But when you have something like that and an international investor see that is how them operating there, me going there, you shoot yourself in the foot. So, to close off on your question, I will not say that, the end result wasn't expected, but I think what has happened over the last year, they have fallen short in a lot of areas in terms of the expectations of not only their own supporters, but the people who don't vote for them. You understand? So they have to do some re-engineering now. They need to recoup. I think Mrs. Prasad Bisesa need to drag the team back in together, have a little retreat, get their philosophy going, probably restart the deck, and you're into your second year. You have the second year, a year and a half, probably 12 to 18 months. Otherwise, if you don't make fundamental changes, it's going to be harder to get out of the pit that we're going in. So, as I say, I'm an eternal optimist. I in my writing, I don't chastise anybody, I don't brutalize anybody, tell hey, there's a better way. And this is the way I see it, because the way how my view of the world is. And you may not agree, but I'll take constructive criticism happily.
All right. So, Rushton, as we have now ended our conversation, if someone wants to get in contact with you, how do they do that?
Well, boy, I am on social media. I am fully accessible. I've always been accessible. While as MP, I have 2 Facebook pages. I'm on LinkedIn, and it has my email address. It has my phone number. I am telling you, I get calls every day from everybody who still wants help with things. I refuse nobody. I give assistance, I give ideas, I give commentary. I mean, as long as it's not costing my pound and a crown in my pocket, you're going to get my assistance for anything. So I'm easily accessible. You just look for Rushton Paray online. I mean, if you Google me, you'll get 10,000 hits. All right, and just click on one, you're going to find me. And in Mayaro, we're a household name there, from the youngest child to the oldest person. I want to see Mr. Paray, they just point in a direction. And I tell people, when I became MP, you get actually 3 MPs. You get me, you get my wife, you get almost siblings. Everybody right here. You can't find Paray, you will find one of them.
Yes.
And you'll get access to service.
I love that. I love that. So, listeners of the Blueprint podcast, there you would have had it. An in-depth analysis to the blueprints as to how Trinidad and Tobago can become a better place, a more hopeful place for all our citizenry to shine. And what was most interesting about this conversation is this. We have seen that our upbringing, our community, our family, how each one of those component parts play a significant role into the eventual product of the individual. While it may not necessarily define exactly who you are, it does give a prediction as to the type of individual that you are going to be. And most importantly, those of you who have that passion, that love for your country, know this, that we have learned from a former member of parliament that when it is that you are entering that sphere of life, that sphere of public service, ensure that you have your black lines drawn and that you understand compromise, but you ensure you don't cross those lines. Until we meet each other again on the Blueprints, this has been a very much interesting conversation on the Blueprint of Rushton Paray. Thank you.